So I'm talking about two projects. So it started out with Meatspaces, and then I made one specifically for Mozilla, for Firefox OS and Android and desktop, and how one led to the other. So I'll start out with Meatspace and about how it started, the lack of features, and the things that happened because of the community, which caused things like muting, and then as a result, a group of people regularly go on there and they help make it what it is today. And Chat Spaces is actually a continuation of that. So it's actually where you actually can have one-to-one or one-to-many group private conversations, not unlike Google Wave, but it's just taking the Meatspace structure and sort of taking it into a more group private direction. So we'll start with Meatspace. This basically started as a big, joke in May last year, where I've been doing a lot of node chat and mixed media experiments, and then my colleague Soleil was doing a lot of webRTC GIF stuff. So I thought, do you think you could just make it so if you send a message and then you hit enter, it starts taking a picture of your face and makes an animated GIF of like you hitting the enter? And she's like, I don't see why not. So we put it all together in a couple of days, and then we had this really crappy beta version that we just ran with for a few months internally between Mozillians. And we were just like, yeah, it's pretty cute, it's fun. But there wasn't the numbers, it was just like 5 or 10 of my colleagues, playing around. And then I was invited to speak at Real-Time Conf, and I decided to not make this public until that day, which was October sometime, and because I didn't want to ruin the whole thing. And then when I actually made it public, it kind of blew up. So there was like over 8,500 visits in one day, and the server didn't go down, so that means LevelDB is good and Droplet's good at DigitalOcean. So what we did was we started with just one public channel that everyone would just send to. So there wasn't a concept of like multiple channels you could create or anything. And we kept it that way so that we could just focus the experience. And what I did do was allow developers to access the API, because all it was posting. You didn't have authentication, so you could just post as whoever. And you could listen to outgoing sockets. So if you were to look at this code, which I'll give you the link to later, you'll see that you can actually listen in on the sockets and post and do all that stuff. But the posting, I didn't want it to go too crazy, so I added just a API key to just limit crazy people and annoying people from doing anything stupid. So that did something interesting, because I made that decision just so that I could, do this as a side thing and have my day job and, not make this into some crazy thing, because it was just a silly little, very elaborate WebRTC socket demo. But as a result, a lot of things happened. People were making creative bookmarklets and plugins, like, delaying their posts so that they could go do a handstand in the back or whatever. Or they would make little remixes, or even like a Tumblr blog exists for this community, like even non-things like that exist with the code. There's a bot on there that if you trigger like exclamation mark whatever, it would bring in certain GIFs as like, it's like an inside joke. And it was great because I didn't have to do anything, but the community just made a bunch of stuff. So I was like, oh, this is great. And sometimes they would cross-post to a Twitter account for it and make like crazy stuff happen. And what happened in the first couple of days that it blew up was that, of course, you have a bunch of people from 4chan and Reddit, doing who knows what, what. And we were like, well, we got to like maintain this flood and everything. So we had throttling, but we also decided, well, we want to mute, but I don't want to mute from the server, because then that mutes the person completely. So we just put a client-side mute button, which just takes their browser fingerprint. and takes their IP and does an MD5 hash and then just sort of works from there. That doesn't solve everything, because if they're clever and they really wanted to troll, they could just keep changing their user agent and all this stuff. But it's like, they won't know because it's client-side muting, so just people don't see it in their feed. So it's like they're just talking to themselves, they get bored, and then they leave. That's most normal people. There's probably like 1 or 2 crazy people that just like are obsessed, and that's different, or they're just trying to like annoy people. But this has been almost like past 4 months, so I haven't seen anything surprisingly too offensive, and I think I've only seen like 4 penises, so it's pretty good. So now I just yell at them, I mute at them, and I'm like, nobody wants to look at your penis. And if people actually block their camera, you're not allowed to post unless you allow your camera, but if they block their camera purposely, like put tape over it or something, everyone in the community just shuns that, so they all just mute that person. They're like, get out of here. So it's really interesting, and if anyone says anything offensive or hurts someone that's in the community, they are just really protective of it. So I was like, well, I guess that's what happens. So now we have this community, and most of the important stuff now isn't actually about the code. The code is more or less unchanged. It gets cleaned up here and there and stuff. We make it very clear that we don't want features, we don't want anything, because we just want to make this as minimal as possible. This is a great stepping stone for any one of you to fork and use in your own company or do remixes or whatever, but it's like it shouldn't be more than what it is, and then you can do whatever and shoot your own foot. So that's not my problem. But in this, so now most of the energy is spent on making sure the community's happy. So I've turned into like a part-time community manager instead of coding, but it's really fun because a lot of these people in Portland, New York, Vancouver, Toronto, San Francisco, they have meetups. So they actually meet up and hang out and get along, and it's not weird because they all kind of know how each other reacts from their GIFs and their chats. So it's not like on IRC when you talk to someone for like 5 years and you're like, we totally get along, and then you meet them in person and everything's really awkward because you never saw each other's face. And this is different because everyone I've met, it's like, yeah, I expected them to be the way that they are, just based on their GIFs. So that's really comforting, and it feels safe that way because you can see the identity. They don't have to go through the whole process of authenticating and all that stuff. They can just go in and out. You can lurk, whatever. I did put in blacklisting at one point. So I would blacklist certain fingerprints, and then they couldn't post. It would return like a 403. But I had to remove that shortly after because it actually encouraged, because then they knew they were actually banned, and it would encourage them to just keep doing things to waste my time. So sometimes I think it's like, it's better to just be passively muting them and not like aggressively, because then trolls just find ways to just annoy you for the rest of the week, and you're just like, I don't want to deal with this. You don't want to have to constantly moderate something that is just a waste of your time. So I ended up taking out the blacklisting because it really didn't offer any kind of value, except gave me more of a headache to have to constantly deal with this. And in terms of if you ever make social apps similar to or related to or spinning off of this kind of idea, and you have a lot of people in there, as engineers, you should be very, very, very controlled about what you let in as a feature and what you don't, because every little feature becomes exponentially more complex in dealing with the whole system. And then everything just gets out of hand. And then you end up with like some sort of crazy Yammer thing that like nobody wants to use. Sorry for anyone who works at Yammer. But it's just, it's so much, or it's like Facebook, there's just so much stuff going on that you can't actually control it and make sure you can make one experience the best that you can, because there's just too much. There's just choice paralysis. And I actually wrote a blog post about why I did it this way. And I still get people asking me like, you should have a private one-on-one chat, or you should have people create their own channels. Like, I can't have people create their own channels, because if I do, they're going to do bad things, like make like those weird Reddit threads or whatever, and it's like, what are you going to do? So now I have to manage that and deal with all the legal implications of that on an open source project? No thanks. And But one of the good things is that this is also ephemeral, so after 10 minutes, the messages get wiped out of the server. So technically, if someone does something stupid, I'm kind of off the hook, because there's nothing saved on my server after 10 minutes. So that's interesting. I think if someone scrapes the data the other way, that's on their server, and I don't know how that, I haven't really dealt with that too much. And an interesting thing that happened because of this is that I guess it blew up, and a lot of people showed up, even Moot from 4chan. So that's pretty cool. So we made a GIF out of his face. So if you put, if you go to the chat later and you put !Moot, you'll see his GIFs show up randomly. Let's see. So October was when the big North American tech rush came in. And then for some reason, this ended up in a French women's online zine, a beauty fashion blog, and a Mademoiselle around, I think it was maybe January or something. I can't remember, maybe December, I don't know. Anyways, then a rush of French girls showed up. They just 20-year-olds in university that have nothing to do with tech. They were in university for biology, psychology, whatever. And it was just weird because they all started speaking French and going crazy on there, and then all the North American people were like, what's going on? And we were so they were calling it the French invasion. And then I tried to leave it like that, and they're hold strong with the single channel, and then that was what I decided after a few days. We were this isn't gonna die down, that I made the executive decision, even though I said only one channel, that let's just split it to 2, and it's based on language. So it's fr.meatspaces, and then there's just chat.meatspaces, which is the international version. There's also a Spanish one, but it's not really used except as a back channel by the French, so. But the interesting thing with this is that I thought this made sense because, and I jumped the gun and made es.meatspaces thinking that we could get a Spanish community, but we can't yet because it hasn't been pushed to the right group yet. Just because a bunch of people speak Spanish doesn't mean they'll all get up, relate to the same jokes from different countries. The reason why the French one worked is because they were all reading the same magazine, had the same jokes. So they were all, doing the same memes and everything together. They had weird memes that we never even heard of, so we were like, what's that unicorn thing? But in the North American tech one, we always have our own memes, right? With all the stuff on 4chan and stuff. So then that was immediate. So it was clear to me that the communities only made sense, and they only really needed a channel based on sort of I guess it's a language, culture, whatever thing. So you have to get the right kind of group together. So I haven't taken down es.meatspaces. I'm still hopeful that something will happen out of it, but at worst, it's someone's back channel for when things get too noisy somewhere else. And I believe the French community, a lot of them live just in various parts of France. They plan meetups or have, but I'm not really sure what has come of it. But I know in San Francisco and Portland, it's a big, they always meet up and they have drinks or chat or hang out and go bowling or whatever. So that's pretty cool. So I figured that if people start knowing each other really well, they can either take it to something like instant messaging or IRC if they want to continue talking further, or Twitter DMs or something. But then I thought, well, let's try one where it's just private group chat. So I proposed this project to Mozilla for as an HTML5 app that would work on Firefox OS and be cross-platform. So we tried chat spaces, which was a continuation. It was different code that would do this, but it would have rooms, private rooms for different groups of people. And this one obviously needs profiles. So you would use Persona to log in, and then you would be tied to that profile. But you could send, in Snapchat or anything, you can just send to multiple people that are in your friends list, a message. And and in Meatspace fashion, it would have the animated GIF. So that it's like sort of group chat with animated GIFs. This one's also open source. It's not like the super greatest code, but you know, that's what I do for 4 months on my own. So, and then instead of the ephemeral thing where it disappears after 10 minutes, we decided a different mechanism where it would just like only pull up the last 25 ever, and there's no pagination. I struggled with deciding whether it should have pagination so you can look at older messages, but in this sort of conversational model, it doesn't really make sense to archive stupid conversations you have with one or many people. It's like when you talk to people in real life, you don't log everything in the back of your head and go, oh, remember like 2 weeks ago when you said exactly this thing? And I think that's some sort of remnant of the past that we just like keep logging things for the sake of logging. I don't know what it is. And we have to sort of, I feel like we have to try to get used to the idea of trying to make digital communications where that doesn't matter, and like you get rid of all those problems with pagination, infinite scroll, caching. It's like you don't have to edit the conversation. Like it's like the same mechanism as Twitter because you just set it and forget it. And as an engineer, that sounds like great news because you don't have to deal with this crap where you're just like you have to edit this thing and then rebroadcast it everywhere, and then you find out you need to use a relational database or not, or do something, and then you just don't want to code anymore. So it's like creating these limitations makes for more interesting other problems that you deal with. Like in this case, let's say, how to build a community or how to make this work for this group of people. Like your app shouldn't be made because it was made from your head. You make it, and then you have people try it out, and they have to sort of, you have to make it around them, or else it's like you're just making something in a void and no one's going to use it. And that's why I see a lot of startups now that are doing ephemeral selfie chat apps, and they're just sort of like, everyone's sort of like 1,000 monkeys typing on 1,000 typewriters. Everyone's just doing all this stuff, trying it out, and it's like, how about, it's like Tumblr with whatever. And it's like, sometimes you shouldn't try those remixes too crazy. You should just do something that you just know how to do really simply, and then it's fun for you and your friends. And then you go from there. And then you learn from it. You shouldn't just go like, I'm going to do this thing, and I'm going to make a startup and make millions. And it's like, well, if there's like 100 chat apps, I don't think yours is going to hit the top unless it's like, it's usually because of luck, timing, the right people. That's always it. It's not how great the app is or how great the design is. It's always, because like, Meatspace it looks okay, but it was pretty shitty before. And it was like people were still using it, and people still buy stuff from Amazon. It looks pretty shitty. So just like, design's nice, but don't break your leg over it. No one cares. They just want to like find people to date. That's all they want to do online. That's like, focus your app on that. If you're doing a social app, you're good to go. And the easier you make it, the happier they are. If you start adding little like 10 different buttons and side filters and stuff, it's just easier for them to just meet the person in a bar. I mean, it's like, so in this one, in chat spaces, it's the same as like Meatspace in terms of working everywhere. But yeah, it will work on Firefox OS, just not yet. And these are the links, but if you have your laptop, I always do the infamous load this page up and go watch yourself. So chat.meatspac.es. So there's people from Russia, France, Canada, the States. Oh, that's my bot. That was me this morning in the hotel, and then someone made a GIF of it. So if I do this, yeah, it's a little. What's James doing? Anyways, so yeah, there's the Moot GIF. Anyways, so chat spaces is similar, except in this case, this is like a dashboard of conversations. And let's say I go here, and then, yeah. It's actually pulling from online, but you see, like, all the people that I added to the conversation or whoever did are at the bottom, and then the conversation's up there. It's still sort of in this alpha state. If you feel like you can test it out at chatspaces.org. You just have to sign up and then find out what your friends' usernames are. So it's a little like, when I made this, I thought like, yeah, this might work, but I still think this is still the best, even though I spent a painstaking 4 months working on that one and it was a lot more complicated, which proves my point. You know, complicated is not always the best, but you can just keep fixing it. But the problem with it is that finding people, the discoverability without using, I think that's why a lot of systems use like Twitter, Facebook to connect, and then you find your friends there. But I mean, doing it just straight out, it's difficult because then they go, what's your username on there? And you have this wall. You have like walls. Like now you got to sign in. That's one wall. Now you got to find someone. That's another wall. And then now you got to like add the message and then find them. That's like 4 walls. And then you're like, oh, okay, I have to go do something else. This, it's like you just allow your camera. You don't even have to log in. And you're like, hey, okay, now I can go. You know. And I think that's why people like it. So you can see how there's a mute here. And then you can always reset the mutes. And then those are the other language channels. And I'm also recording myself doing this conference on another thing. This is another project, which is like Meatspace, but it's like certain people have channels that they can broadcast stuff to. And what they do on Meatspace's TV is interesting because sometimes people do cooking shows and GIFs, and everyone's commenting like, oh, what's that? So that's cool. And I think what else? Yeah, that's the source code that Selena posted. So if, oh yeah, oh wait. Oh right, there's Clay Shirky. So yeah, let me just go here. Those are the links. I'll post this online after the talk, and then you can just grab all that stuff. I didn't show Meatspace's TV yet because it's still kind of, you know, in super alpha. I'm still testing out the waters on that. Like I like to take this stuff and sort of simmer on it for like a couple of weeks, a couple of months. I don't like to be like, oh, I built this and now, but as an engineer, I'm tempted to be like, oh, I could add this and this, and I'm like, just stop, just go drink some wine, just do something else, go running, whatever, come back, and see how the behavior is. Don't always try to make things that are gonna try to bring in like everybody, like your mom, your grandmother, your cousins, your friends. Like it doesn't work. Like good communities come from really niche relationships, so it's like just concentrate on that, and getting 50 people to regularly come to your thing and be fully supportive is way like worth more than getting 5,000 clicks with no returns. So always concentrate on that, and you only know your community because it'll reflect who you are. Like I mean, I always get the Meatspace community is kind of weird, and debating whether I should show this page. Maybe I will. Just don't get me in trouble. This is just a joke that went completely weird. So we made a joke about saran wrap being a fetish. And then that's Brian from Angular. That's me. That's my coworker. That's a guy from GitHub. Yeah. Well, when you click, you'll see. And if it makes you uncomfortable, you can close it, but just don't sue me. It was just a big joke. But now it's funny. But it was basically like we just take jokes that we make up in the community, and then we just go, let's make art out of it, and then we just spin it off, and then just call it a day. There's also like Meatspace moments. So one of the community members, Laura, made this as sort of the highlights of, yeah, of like highlight GIFs of things that happened in the chat. And we've developed a FOMO, so fear of missing out. So if you're not able to be on the chat, they're like, oh my God, I have so much FOMO, you know, because they don't know what happened and a bunch of things happen. So usually we'll have community members that go on a weekend camping trip or something, and then when they come back, we're like, yeah, you missed out on a bunch of stuff, and we have to list out all the things like so-and-so got married, they got divorced, this cat did this thing, and it's just like, oh my God, I missed out on all this stuff. So feel free to try to be part of the community. I mean, we're really welcoming, and we're just really weird. So if you don't like weird people, that might not be your cup of tea, but and what else? The official, someone took Meatspace, so I just put Meatspac. That's the official Twitter. And we started using this stupid meme about if you write wow upside down, it's mom. And then that became a thing. Like if you're saying like, wow, that's amazing, and then someone would reply with mom. And then I think they made like an IRC bot for that would do the reverse every time. What was the other one? Wow, mom.js. That became a thing. Yeah, I don't know. But the great thing about this community is all the people involved are like from respectable, awesome organizations. Like there's GitHub, there's Google, there's Mozilla, there's like Flickr. Like there's a bunch of people who are tech people that just like hang out here on a regular basis and are really supportive. So I found that really amazing. And then they merge with people who aren't even programmers. There's like people who are in like art school. There's like people who are teenagers, or people in their like 40s or 50s. Like it's just a nice mix of people that a lot of people say it's reminiscent of the 90s when they first discovered the internet, like the whole discovery aspect. And it's not about selling ads or anything. And this particular chat will never be monetized. So all you people who want to do a startup with me and want to give me money, I'm not interested, so good luck. So I think it should be the way that it is. We have too many things where it's good to monetize on stuff, but I think sometimes we have to open source some of these things and give people the opportunity to experiment and do their own thing. I mean, you got to give back a bit. And there is an iOS app. If you go to the store and you search for Meet Chat as one word, you'll get the iOS app that actually works with this, and a community member made that too. There was an Android app. It is open source, but that had to be pulled because someone was able to sniff the API key. So if you guys ever want to help that person, feel free. I don't have the link here directly. It might be in this cube here. Somewhere. Nope. I don't know. It's somewhere. Well, I'll find out. Anyways, if you want to help, you can help with that. And otherwise, on Android, you can use it on Chrome or Firefox, and because it has webRTC. You cannot use it on Safari because they don't support webRTC, or Chrome on iOS, so don't bother. Just use Meet Chat. And I think that's it. Woo!